welcome to another session from the Wiser Psalm. We've got the glorious rain today, which was much needed, I have to say, and a bit of thunder, and it's definitely a lot cooler. Last week was pretty hot, so I'm not complaining. I don't think nature's complaining. We definitely needed the old rain, and it's here. Now, whether that means the end of the summer, which can happen quite often, who knows, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, good evening to you. Just a few interesting things just to discuss about what's going on with this monarch. You know, he's drooping his colour, he's off today with his hat on, looking like his dad, they reckon. Sun's up and down giving it, I'm going to make massive changes when I'm the king. Already. His dad's only been in the job for, 10 minutes? And already Son's going, get off the throne, Dad, I'm having it, and I'm making changes. Well, no, I don't think so. He's flunked it already, this fella. And what they get away with this time, the next one intends to pick up as de jure. Not just de facto, because that's what we've got. They want to turn this charade into de jure. That's it. Everybody's agreed. Game on. I say I'm not so sure about that. Because what's been bothering me for quite some time is, why are there no notes printed with his face on it? Why? It doesn't make sense. Is he no longer claiming ownership of the land? Because if he isn't, that's fine. He's not offering up or issuing the currency. But he's not issuing the currency, is it? But, as we're going to find out, he's claiming ownership of the land. So there's something serious afoot here. I mean, it's so serious and so dastardly. It makes Dick Dastardly look like a bit of a saint. And people are not seeing him, they're missing it. I don't think anybody's talking about it, they're not contemplating it. But this has huge ramifications for the fact that the debt exists. We know it, we're all paying through the nose with VAT on everything. Why is he no longer issuing the currency with his fat face on? There's something not right. Because he's not claiming the debt of his mother, obviously, on that fiat, but yet claiming ownership. You can't do that. Ownership is the issuer. But he's claiming ownership. Does that make sense as to why it's been bothering the living daylights out of me? Since he put his lips on that funny book, that nobody has a clue what's in it. We don't have a clue what's in it. None of us. And it's acclaimed that he's the king. Well, I don't. It's not. No, I don't claim it at all. Because, in my opinion, how could we possibly give him sovereignty as the holder of the office of monarch when we haven't got a clue what the hell he's oathed himself to? It's impossible. We can't do it. It's a fraud from the get-go. And Johnny Come Lately Sunshine, his little boy, is bigging himself up on the, well, I'm going to make changes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. If I were his dad, I'd be shiting myself. Especially if it's true and he is the son of the King of Jerusalem. Oh dear. The Solomons are coming in to chop his head off and put the cell on there with the shit system that nobody actually likes. So we're just going to have a little bit of an investigate into what the hell's going on. And we're not going to give the answers, of course, but we're just going to look at it. Because I think, you know, there's a lot of smart people out there. This is where it's at, folks. You got to remember, he's the head of the Commonwealth. He's a blag. A big blag. Carrying on from the big blag that his mummy did. Now, let's just turn that again on its head a bit, because let's look at it another way. We're still using notes with the Queen's head on. Is she still alive? Does she have to still be alive to hold the debt and still have the Bank of England issue that said note? She has to be alive. Didn't the Biden over there on the other side of the pond end a speech this week with God Save the King, the Queen? Is he not as chapped as we think? Is it? We're all looking at this, oh my God, he's chapped, but really he's telling us truth. Why are we still on a debt instrument with the face on of somebody who's supposed to have died, which means she can no longer claim ownership of the land? Son is. His son's already trying to nick it already. Nero, I forgot Nero going down here, Nero in the mix, Caligula, all this kind of mod. Can you see my take on what I'm saying and why I think we need to focus to this. What is going down? Is she still alive? Because the face is on the debt instrument. He's not having it. He's not taking it on. How can he do that? He's claiming ownership of land. Have I said it enough now to make you think? There's something not right. There's something seriously not right here. But of course we do know, do we not, that they are moving to transfer their estates, or at least the equitable side, into the no-hide system. So I've been trying to rack my brain to work out what is the strategy that would be needed to be employed to satisfy that. Looking at what we've just looked at there. Is she still alive? Why is he not claiming, or why is he not issuing the debt instrument? It's not clear. Not clear as a bell. Any road. Who's here? Debbie says, alright kids, alright Flossie. Wayne says, good evening all. Good evening to you, Wayne. Debbie says again, happy Father's Day to you who have sown and propagated your seeds. I have indeed. I've thrown it all over Lancashire. But I've only got 4 seeds. So clever. Oh, lucky. I'd say lucky more than anything. But whichever way it goes, I've got 4 flea bags that are complete and utter nut jobs, which you have to expect having me as the father. You know. So anyway, they're not done too bad considering. They've all turned out pretty well. So thanks for that, Deborah. Because yes, I have continued the white honkies. We're becoming a dying breed, and I have continuing to breed on the white honky side of things. And I don't care what anybody says. I've never cared, and I'm not going to start caring. So there we go. All I say is get out there and breed the white race quick if you've not had the juice. Now then, Paul says, good evening Sean and everyone, good evening to you. And Debbie says, God bless climate change. I agree totally, it's the best thing in the world that's ever happened. But then it's not, because I've just actually put a video on the Facebook of a guy who's saying that the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand was actually when they switched on this machine. So they didn't actually mean to do that, it was a bit of an accident. So all you New Zealanders that got slotted, oh dear, the military industrial complex has got new toys. And it's down there in the South Seas, which is of course nobody can go to, can't fly to. You don't want to tell you what's going on. They've named Great Swathes after this fraudulent royal family. They're not even royal, are they really? Anyway, and I believe Randy Andy is refusing to leave. He's not leaving. I'm not leaving my house, he says. It must be quite a shit, this new geezer, if he's kicking his brother out. What do you reckon? But Andy says no. No, I'm not going. And that's it. So he's not moving anywhere. Untitled says, hello Gossman, Sean, Joe and Untitled. Well, good evening to you. Debbie says good evening to you, to Untitled. So, and oh, we've got I'm missing emojis here. I'm missing them. It's only notes or coins, Sean. Well, they have printed some specials, haven't they, on the gold and the silver kind of side. But we're looking at the currency that we're using. Because it's a promissory note. So it's a debt instrument. But it's being issued on the land rights held in the monarch. So there's something going on. Now, I have investigated it quite a bit, and I think I'm finding what I need to find, but I'm not going to discuss what I'm finding yet because it might take a somewhere else, and you know it's a serious issue, and I don't think it needs to be messed with. So I have found some interesting stuff as to potential, but then it still doesn't give me the picture, as it were. It's just giving me ideas as to how they could be hiding this, because of course nobody's paying attention. Lex says, good evening, Sean. Good evening, Lex. Nita says, or are they getting ready for digital? Well, yeah, definitely they are. But the thing is, we're still operating on a instrument that's got the face on of the person holding the rights to the land upon which is issued these promissory notes. Something's not right. But yes, they are, of course, waiting to come up with the digital. But we're still using the debt system. Is she still alive? That would be my... It would be such a breach of the game, I would suggest. Now, of course, I could be wrong. And if there's better minds out there that know what crack is, please let me know one way or another. But it just stinks. It stinks to the high heaven. It really does, because he's claimed the ownership of the land, which we'll have a little look at. June says, good evening all, good evening June. They think they're above the law. Well, they are above all the law, i.e. monarch side. The barony or the aristocracy are under common law, because of the rights to the land as second right holders, as tenants. But again, we went through the lords, didn't we? We can see that so many of them are now, they've been installed, and this has been going on since, well, they were pulling them in 1850. The old Red Shield got put in there, didn't they? The first one was of interest was, I can't remember his name. We have gone through it on one of the videos when we went through the timeline of Sabotage Zevi. Remember that? And Jacob Frank went through the entire timeline of things that happened. We also covered how that affected England. So that's another good chronology that I put together, and it pretty much gives you the picture as relates to the Babylonians parading themselves as Jews, as Christians, as Muslims, etc. How they managed to secure their positions in everything. So we've looked at that. I've lost my train of thought there, but they are so above the law. You see, this is where I hope I've sort of given you some kind of idea as to how we can sort of understand that question. Are they above the law? Because once you start to grasp the jurisdictions, then you start to understand how that jurisdiction's working, how it's operating, and more importantly, how it's got you tied into it. Then you can see that it's not that you've never been above that law. At equity, you're in that law because you've made an agreement. You're in agreement with that side of it, the equity side, on this SQV. Right? You're in there. You're on agreement because everything you've got is based on that SQV title that is being administered or as by the state when in effect, and you're the trustee. Whereas when you can shift that back on the reversion side, because you've fully understood it and what it means and how they've done it and what's involved in relation to how they keep it in place, because of course they're blocking you, they're not telling you, nobody ever told you this. Nobody ever told you that they were the key to the chest of your estate at 21. No, they don't. I can see they're obfuscating that now. They got 7 years this and 7. Forget that nonsense. This is a right that you have. Yeah? So, but what were I saying? So when you start to grasp that, then you could say, you can position yourself above that law. Not because you're being evil, not because you're a criminal, and not because you're a member of a secret society, but because you've understood the concept of it, what it is, and how it traps you. So that's one. Second is, Okay, so you put right the equity, but you still, because of your right to land, which is what the king's holding, you're still under the common law. Yeah? But again, if you wanted to come out of the common law, you'd have to come in as equal majesty with the king, wouldn't you? Well, what's above the king? The ecclesiastical. Although in England, the king also took the ecclesiastical. Now that's something that I've sort of reminded myself of today, just going through Blackstone's piece on the king's revenue, which I've got ready for you to have we can have a quick look, and I'll put it up for you to see after the video. So that's interesting in and of itself, just going through that, how the king's gained his revenue. Because it obviously shows Parliament is involved in that, etc., etc. And he's basically breaking down the changes that have occurred through the centuries in relation to the law. Now, interestingly as well, he does actually class Constitution as British, which I don't think I've seen him do before, but for him to see it in that way, so when you look at like perhaps William and Mary, there's two sides. Some say it's a bad thing what they did, but then the other side to that is that they were actually trying to pull in what was common law and Magna Carta relevant to land rights were pulled into the parliamentary side of it because Parliament had become so powerful, thanks to Cromwell. So that were an interesting study this afternoon, or just going through that, really interesting, because you can see what angles are playing as to what rights the king has, what rights Parliament's taking, etc., etc. But the interesting thing is, we're given this idea that there's sort of enmity between the position of monarch and Parliament, when in fact that's not the case at all. That, I would say, is a pretense. It's to obfuscate the power of the actual monarch, as they've removed the laws from our minds, the grammar, the Latin, and the grasp on law itself and our system here. So as they've obfuscated that, it's like I got an image today where you can see that the whole thing they've done is a scam. And the only way they're managing to get away with it is because nobody's seen it. Nobody's seen it, kind of thing. And I think a big part of undermining it is to start to approach it as to why as the holder of the land, is he not issuing the currency, the debt, the promissory note upon that right to land? And also he's holding the ecclesiastical. But is it? They've made changes, haven't they, or tried to make changes so they could have a Catholic. So I think that's the blag. It is, in essence, pulling it back under Rome. And of course, Rome isn't the original. And I'd say it hasn't been since, let's say, the Crusades brought Solomon over here. You've got two guilds, two sects of ideologies. You've got the one is the old English churches and the monasteries, that architecture, and then you've got this incoming Gothic shit that's disgusting, and then they start to encapsulate this Gothic style on top and around what already existed. So these cathedrals that we call Gothic probably weren't. They've just encased it. Concrete, big secret that they've always kept to themselves as the guilds. And then you can also look at it and say, well, how come it's been so powerful? Well, I think the shadow side, the Gothic side that came in through the Solomons in the Crusade days, maybe a couple of centuries to bed in, but then by the 12th century, by the 1200s, they're starting to build these cathedrals. They're starting to build on top of what was. They're encasing old architecture with this new, which looks like it's stone. You wouldn't see any different, but it's concrete. And this is how they've done it. But more importantly, the empire behind this Gothic Solomon side is the military. So old church Christianity, Catholicism as it was, by the time we got to the Reformation, it was pretty clear the Solomon side had started to shift the Vatican's thing into this slave system, which the Catholic Church originally prevented. That where its rocket fell on all the time. That's why they hate it so much. Just as the Bolsheviks said about Bolshevism not taking root on England was because it crashed on the rock of the English Constitution. So it's always been a bind to this Bolshevistic nonsense, Solomon stuff, as England itself, which is obviously why they've been trying to they've been getting rid of it for so long. 1066, bang. You know, they've got the military side here. And then we can see it all starting to go. Still, we see history gives it as it's still under Rome, but you've got the church as was, and then you've got the Carolingian imperial military wing, which today we can see as the Prussians, which of course is of what you see when you see the British Empire. That's what you're seeing. It's what created Islam way back in the day. I mean, there's more than enough evidence to show that it's got teeth, that was the case, and it was specifically created for one thing, and that was to do war by subterfuge also. But that's because it holds on to a lot of Talmudic doctrine. But that's just the situation it is. You know that if you read the Quran, you know that if you read the Hadiths and the Sirah. You cannot read those works and not see the reality of it, because that is exactly where it's at. Now it's who's controlling that. If it's going with the Quran, the Sharia, then it's actually okay. There's a lot of good stuff in the Quran, there really is. But of course, like everything else, it's the no's that take the sort of body of the religion off the actual doctrine, as it's done with Christianity, as it's done with the Hebrew tradition, that we know today as Judaism, which of course again isn't. It's the Talmud and these people that are of the Talmud have called themselves Jews for so long, because for a big part of the early centuries, many centuries ago, they were classed as name stealers. Now the Native Americans, interestingly, on the Facebook the other day, one came up and they were talking about how this. I mean, obviously they see it as white folks because they're still embedding that because they don't really know our history. How they stole their names and put maybe half-breed people in and then all of a sudden you've got this rising so-called Native American so-called representative of the Native Americans, when in fact they're not. They represent this other side, and they use the term they're stealing our names. So I just posted on it about the fact that it's nothing new, and this name stealing has been going on for a long time over in Europe, and they were looking at it. So, and then they asked me to join the group, so I have done. So they were interested in that data. So I thought that were interesting, but we can see that that's been going on, and a lot of what we think are this. Actually, that name's been stolen, the family line, its importance has been stolen many moons ago and has been operated by this other. So all this stuff has teeth, and you can see it, you know, especially when you're looking in history and the movements of some of these families. I'm losing my track there a bit, I forgot where we were. Anyway, I went off on a tangent. Let's have a look. So they're getting ready for digital. Yeah, we'll probably get a dollar crash soon. How do Sean? Hello one and all, says Jeff. Alright Jeff, Debbie says, would you expect them to completely replace the notes? Well, they've actually said the Lord's added a cash side to this digital bill as it was going through. Now I haven't followed up to see if they've knocked that off or anything, but I haven't seen any headlines to say so either. So, I mean, because they have to keep a system going for themselves. Don't they? They really have to. But this is another point, and I made it last week, but they've, since the stock markets began, so what, 1600s, let's say, where you could buy stock in the East Indies, and the Virginia Company, and the Africa, all these trading blocks, shares were offered. So you've got a stock market, haven't you? You've got one going there. So let's just say, since that started, that's the only game on the table when it's presented to you there as the economy. It's all about this, when really that's just the figures and nonsense of private enterprise. So it's private enterprise. The real economy is in what you do day in, day out, where you buy, what you buy, who you buy it from, who we intermingle with, who we do this for, who we do... That's the economy. But because we all follow that nonsense, we believe them when they go, oh, it's collapsing, everybody shoot yourself. Well, really all that's happening there is it's a play on the private, corporate, the monsters. Why do we care? Oh, well, of course, the reason why they do it is because every time they cock it up, we bail them out. They give us credit to issue notes or debt instruments into that private realm. They're saved. And then they'll spend that on buying up property and land in your nation. That's how they're scooping it all up. And of course, the monarchs here have been party to that. In fact, they've facilitated it. They are responsible for it. Maggie Thatcher privatised our infrastructure. That's corporatism. That's fascism. That's what it is as a political system. And the corporations merge with your domestic system, then you've got fascism is in place as a political reality. And so, your nation's laws are no longer being upheld. It's the laws of the body corporate, which of course is profit. It's all about trade, isn't it? Shipping. Making cash out of what is the cargo. Well, you are the cargo. Your offspring are the cargo. You're your dog. So, another thing as well, I read something that in Second World War, they were just after the First World War, when the flu kicked off, the government set up an idea where they were getting the population ready to have to kill their own pets, and they got quite far with it, so that people were ready to kill all the pets. Now, I'm wishing a little bit of that going on here, where people get a bit of an obsession with it. Well, the pets, it's the animals are this, the animals are that. It's like, it's a shit game, and they've been playing it for a long time, it would appear. Boom. There we go. Where else should we go? Oh, what the hell are them emojis? What's them emojis? Off Jeff. I don't know what they are. I can't see them proper. He's talking to June. Oh, okay then. Hi Debbie, any good news on the house? Did you get plastering job done? Alright, so you're off. Okay, well. Okay, you carry on having your shindigs, it's fine. Cos says, hey up lad, gig's on. Alright, Cos. Could have done with Sean's expertise, to be honest. I could have bribed him with an holiday in the Forest of Dean. Well, why didn't you tell me? I might have come down for £45 million with pesetas. It might have to be pesetas. Don't know where. Well, Payne's actually doing pretty well, to be honest. It's actually faring very well in comparison. So is the economy, regardless of what you might get on the actual TV. But it's actually doing, as can be expected from today, it's doing better than most. Sean, you're on a promise. I'm on a promise. I'll blow it. Right. Well, the cause says it's cracking flags. Are you still red hot there? We've had rain. We've still... No, it's not raining, but we've had some rain today, which it needed. So you're still cracking flags, are you, cuz? Where are you? Where are you at? Debbie says I'm into bartering, particularly when I'm short of feet. Me, Deb, no love being listening to Sheep Farm Boys catching up on the podcast. Listening to Sheep Farm Boys, what are they all about? Not Yorkshiremen, are they? They're Welshmen. Be careful. Be careful you don't start selling your farmyard porn. I'm telling you. They're bloody dodgy, them Yorkshiremen. Sean likes free trade and barter. An exchange. Income could be a problem. Yep, but exchange, trade and barter. Yeah, but of course, if you're a foreigner, it's only foreigners that are taxed. But of course, coming in on the equitable side, you're a foreigner. So you're going to get taxed. Yeah, so just looking into the system and how it actually operates, how it works for them, that's how you can start to see what it is they're up to. Let's have a look. Jeffrey Bob, we've been listening to Sheep from Scarman. I'm a Muslim, please expand on that. Well, Skyman, there is actually a book and a series of videos that were probably made in the 90s of an ex-Jesuit priest who had, I think he'd worked in the libraries, the Vatican libraries, and he'd come across documentation to show that the warrior caste of what we would have classed as Rome in the day were very active in Petra, in Mecca, and around that area. Now, probably, who knows what they were doing, but they were probably conquering, knowing, because that was the warlord side of Rome, the Carolingians, you know, Charlemagne, and all these progeny that came after. Today we call it, or we know it to be, the Prussian, the might of the Prussian army, which, if you take it back, is actually the Teutonic Knights. But it's also, the Teutonic Knights are just an offshoot of what was the Knights Templar. And of course, the Knights Templar and Saladin did actually do deal, which I think we can see playing out today. Now, if you want me to expand on what I was saying about the Sharia, so over the years I've read the Quran quite a few times, because I have a lot of Muslim friends, and when I say Muslim friends, I'm talking about friends who we don't see each other as anything other than men. There's no nonsense between us. We each trust each other, that we've got each other's interests at heart. None of us are trying to shaft or undermine each other. And of course, in those years that we really spent a lot of time together, we shared our realities. So I shared the reality of what it means to be English, and they shared what it means to be a Muslim on England. And we shared everything, and I got a great picture of how it works for you guys as a community, and they got a great picture of what we're up against as well as a community, and why it's gone asunder for us today. Because it's not so much that we've left religion, it's that we've seen religion here for what it actually is. So it doesn't necessarily we've lost our morals. Okay, our younger generations certainly have, because they've had it programmed into them by the corporate taking over the education system in its entirety through such like ARC, academies, Oasis. And basically they've incorporated all the schools now, which is why we get this nonsense being peddled through the UN into these schools. Now, the point on the Sharia is that as a Muslim, of course, this is my understanding, the Sharia is what a Muslim is actually submitting to if you get to the nitty-gritty of it. Now, that's fine. It's fine if the Sharia is fully representative of the Quran. Because if the Sharia isn't, and you're following the Sharia, then you have to start reconciling the idea or the command that the Quran gives you in relation to how you have to see kafir. And because it's very clear that, you know, if you're claiming to be and you're not, and also there's penalties for that for Muslims from command of the Quran. So on that basis, I began to study certain parts of Islam in order I could satisfy myself, or at least understand how is it then, what kind of moves have been made in order that Muslims en masse could have been tricked to just step off the actual Quran and its commandments, because they've not been paying attention fully to whether the Sharia itself is actually fully representative of the Quran. Now, what I found was two things that really stood out first, and that was that the Quran is very clear that you've got to seek knowledge as a Muslim. And it's not just said once, it's said throughout the Quran, if I remember rightly, because it is some time. And then I saw that there's also a command that when Muslims are in other nations that are not Muslim, that the Quran says they have to obey the laws of the nation. Okay, now, obviously, everybody that follows or watches what I do knows that I've been playing with, looking to understand the law, basically. And I learned many years ago that we as English haven't got a clue what our law is. No idea. We've had it taken away from us. What we believe to be law isn't. What we believe to be law is actually contract law. So it's agreements based around contracts. And that is administered and comes out of the government side of this nation. So it's not, nothing the government plays with is actually law. It's the rules of contract. Now we've come to understand that there's been a bit of a mistake made back in the day and being carried forth against us so that we don't actually understand that premise itself, i.e. that we're not actually running on law, we're being run on agreements that we don't know we're actually, or at least we don't know how we've come to be in agreement with it. So we've come to understand in the last 15 years that what we think is law in this nation isn't. So presenting that on the research I was into back then, I started to realise that Islam as a whole on this nation is 100% following what it believes to be law because it's being told it's law. But in fact, you're following. You've come over here as an immigrant on a contract, and the contract is that you will follow contract law. But that's in opposition to actual law. Now, obviously when I wrote this back in the day, I presented it the best I could, and I sent it to certain Muslim elders that I know. And they got back to me rather shocked because they'd understood the basis of what was being presented, and they were rather worried. So I know that put in the correct way does, for any true Muslim, it's not data that can be just brushed aside, it has to be looked at. Because if that's the case, then as is Christianity and the Hebrew tradition as a whole, that for me would be the first stage setup that you guys have been set under when the empire invited you over to England. So that's one side of it also. There were other parts, there were other particular reports and researches that I made, not all at the same time, but over a series of years. And then I present it because I wanted Muslims to at least see it, and I wanted their opinion on it. So the point that I was making that is that if the Sharia isn't representative of the Quran, then according to the Quran, just because you say you're a Muslim, just by definition of what the Quran commands, you're not. You're actually, and then it speaks of kafir. So that was one of my concerns back then. So I hope I've explained what you've asked me to. If there's something I haven't, please feel free to say so. Right, where are we? Michael Jr. Evening, Sean and all. Good evening to you. Michael, Meander v. Maritime Admiralty Law. Yes, absolutely. But because, look, this is something else we've been looking at. I'm only going to brief it because I don't want to... Let's consider why does Freemasonry use the term or class itself as the widow's son? Freemasons. There's a reason. Right? And again, this kind of data is what I'm seeing when I'm studying what I'm currently studying and what I've been studying for the last 8 months. Look at it in this way. When it comes to Christianity, the original church doctrine, it speaks about the eternal soul, who you really are, sojourning here, that we're here to learn, we're here to learn love, basically. That's the basic premise of the old Christian church. And what's been removed from it with this guild side of thing, this Solomon's stuff, has removed our connection to nature. Because when you get back into the old church, which was Celtic, the last king of which here on England was King Oswald, which is his camp, when he went down to fight Penda in Wales from Northumbria, he marched across the Oswald moors, but his camp as a king was where today we have Church Kirk, in church. That's why it's such, and that, it was already a church. It's one of the oldest churches on England. So that's the last Celtic king we had. So it's been from the 600s that they've been moving this other side in. Now the old Celtic church fully engrossed nature and all its literature, all its symbolism used nature symbolism. That's why the Druids were big on the trees. It was all about our man here on the earth and how we interconnect with nature. And of course we've been taken off that now, and we're supposed to think anything to do with nature is classed as paganism. What were I talking about then? Right. So when you were originally here, you were born, the parish would recognise you and protect your rights to the land. Henry VIII changed that, and he held the rights to the land even more because he had the ecclesiastical jurisdiction also on England. So he doubled up his power, basically. Doubled up his revenues and doubled up his tithes. Right? So that's what we're going on there. Now, I'm suggesting, or what I'm seeing, is that the original mother, Heavenly Mother, who we call Mary, and her son Jesus, is a spiritual, symbolic tale. And obviously, we know where that's been physicalised. That's the Templars. All the bullshit about claiming bloodline of Jesus. Well, come on, let's be quite frank about it, chaps. How many great men out there that you've ever read, the sons were just as good, only because they had the bloodline? You know, the quality of the man isn't based on the bloodline. The quality of the avatar can be based on the bloodline, or not, to its negative. But the quality of the man is based entirely in the quality of the man, the character, how he lives, how he thinks, how he exists, how he expresses himself. And remember, we're using the term man to mean male-female in its original form in Genesis 1. This man-woman thing is a garden thing. It's a separate thing altogether. But we're not going to get into that. So, I think, or what it's looking like to me, is that this bastardised slave system, the Solomon side, that this other guild, the Gothic thing, we're pulling in and bringing in, has turned what was a spiritual essence into the whore of Babylon. Now, what I see they've done there is they have played trickery in relation to the mother and the maiden name. Because once that's created, I'd say it's sequestered off to the Vatican or the Church of England, which is now under the Vatican, of course, because it's under Vatican II, which is Zionism, or not so much Zionism, it's Talmudism. Once the father goes in to register the boy or girl, it creates a child, which is a ward of the state. The father's surname is taken, and we know that to be a dead trust. A dead trust. She is now a widow. Is she not? She's a widow mother, and she's handed over her offspring to the whore, who is virgin still. So she's collecting the offspring without having to do the copulation. And that's the bastardised, the mimic. So it's the whore now that's been supplanted onto Rome a long time ago. That's what I'm seeing. So the widow's son, as a cry from a Masonic, is, as I've also come to see, It's a method by which the elites can get men to become sodomites. Because they're coming into the system in the back door, which is what the original word sodomy meant. It has connotations now to anal sex, but purely because you're actually going in through the back door. But the original term sodomy had nothing to do with that. It was about people that were in a system, but they'd found loopholes and ways to get in the back door. So, to be a Mason and call yourself a widow's son, you are making the claim or cursing yourself as now belonging to the whore of Babylon. Now, I'm not saying for a minute we shouldn't hold our mothers in reverence. But have you not noticed over the years, especially when we had all the Masonic television through the 70s and 80s, the sitcoms, etc., they have an obsession with the mother, don't they? It's a bit twisted, if you ask me. That's just my opinion. Respect for mother's one thing, but like Jimmy Savile, he had this obsession with his mother. All these Masonic celebrities always, it come out in some, whether it were whether it were in the thing itself or whether it was in some kind of interview that they're having, obsessions with mother. Widow's son. So you classified yourself as a widow's son because you took your father's surname, you now were operating on a dead trust, but because you're under the fold of the whore, you get prizes. So you get taken out of the rat race to a point, as long as you're a part of the brethren. So that's what I'm seeing. And so the perpetuity instrument, in relation to this bastardized system, is the mother's maiden name. Now, that may not be the case in the Vatican side, but it's certainly, I would say, the case on the English side, which, of course, is the mother of all equitable titles, isn't it? I know it's tied back to Rome and such, but I'm still not so sure. I believe that Justinian created the first, I don't think it went that back far, and I don't think it had anything to do with the Roman Church, per se, until it were being installed upon it. Which, we can see signs of it 900s, when the Carolingians took over the monastic system. So that's what I've sort of come to see in relation to how I'm looking now at the widow's son, wise widow, and the whore, the offspring of the whore of Babylon. So you're entering these secret societies thinking you're with the heavenly mother, when in fact you're not. So again, there's been another rehash of the prophecies of Fatima. And again, they're talking it up. And I'm listening to it again and I'm just thinking, no, that's a threat. So they must have had full ties into the Vatican in 1917 when they issued this out. Because they're still pushing this idea that was, you have to convert. Anybody that converts to Catholicism today is converting to the Talmud, Vatican II. So it doesn't hold true today. However, it did say you can't release it, the third secret, any later than 1960. So I don't know whether it had value before, but because it wasn't achieved, they're trying to use it as a scare tactic or something like that. You know what I mean? But whatever they're doing, they're obfuscating the fact that there was a real church. It did have connection with the heavenly forces, but that's not been so for a long time. But the church did, but this has took over completely. And now, what it was Rome, the church, is now nothing but a Babylonian whore's slave system. That's what it is. It's a slave system. So it's getting interesting, is this study. Not thinking I understand it like we used to do, getting into nitty-gritty, because you can see that there are different jurisdictions, but anything operating. Oh, one more thing, Skyman, that I didn't cover, but I have written about and spoken about before, to the elders of Muslims that I know, or knew many years ago especially. But, it's gone again. Bloody hell. Sorry, it's gone. If it comes back, I'll come back to it, but it's just, so my apologies. Now then, I keep going off track here, don't I? We're never going to get to that, but it's not that long actually. Winston Smith says, good evening, good evening. Cos is in Scotland. Are you baking up there, lad? Well done, you. That's got to be good, man. It's good that the old jocks are getting the sunshine. Solver Mrs. I, Sean, sent you an email above about live birth record. Thank you very much, Solver Miss. Thanks for reply. What instances will this be useful? Have you asked me something? Hang on. What are you asking me there? Just to be clear, because I mean, under which circumstances? Are you talking to me, and in what you're saying exactly? Which part you mean? David Dolby says, Debbie Burnett, are you in the Forest of Dean? I'm in Newent. So David's down there as well in the old Forest of Dean. Yeah. Right, so that's catched up with the old thingies. Let's have a... Right, so where were we? Here we go. How could that not do that? That's just ridiculous. We're having problems again with this nonsense. Hang on. So if I knock that off, does it go? It does. I think that's going to sort it. Right. Just before we do that, I just want to... Why are these big companies? What's running the big companies? And it's the ESG, which is the Environmental Social Governance System. This is what all the WEF, UN bodies are organising themselves to satisfy. And it's the ESG it is, and it needs to be in your minds as to what it is that's pushing nonsense and forcing such as BlackRock and Vanguard, Goldman Sachs and the banks to operate according to the wind and change script and such. Yeah. So that's just, I'll put that up obviously under the video so you can have a look. Now, where am I? Okay. Oh, it's doing it again. It's come back. Sometimes it can knock us off that. So this is an interesting start to the topic, which is meet the world's largest landowners, topped by the British royal family. The British royal family, headed by newly crowned King Charles III, owns 6.6 billion acres of land worldwide. And it's by Rhoda Wilson, and it was June the 18th. So that's today. The British royal family, headed by newly crowned King Charles III, he's not been crowned king. He's been acclaimed. Okay? You've got to get your wording right. Otherwise you'll acclaim him. The British royal family, headed by newly crowned King Charles III, owns 6.6 billion acres of land worldwide. That's more than 37 times as much as the global runner-up, the Catholic Church. Most of the top 25 largest private landowners are Australian cattle farms, but they're outdone by the Inuit of Canada. The following are excerpts from the article What do King Charles III, the Pope and the Canadian Inuit Have in Common, written by Frank Jacobs and published by Big Think. A new report by Madison Trust lists the world's largest private landowners. The Australian agricultural company AACO, Australia's oldest and largest farming conglomerate, which is beef focused, manages 17.3 million acres, which is about 1% of Australia's entire landmass. AACO, the 7th largest private landowner in the world, is now majority owned by UK billionaire Joe Lewis, who grew his stake in the company to more than 50% in September 2022. Lewis, who is the 39th richest person in Britain, is also the majority owner of soccer club Tottenham Hotspur. Well, I would say to you, this guy is a front. Right? Not his own man. Lewis can't claim to own the world's largest farm. However, that distinction goes to the Madanjiang city mega farm in northwestern China, close to the Russian border. Its 22.2 million acres means it's slightly bigger than Maine and almost as big as Austria. Still, Lewis is not the largest private landowner in Australia. That prize goes to mining magnate Gina Rinehart, who owns large chunks of both her own country and the US. Reinhardt is Australia's wealthiest person in 2012, was the world's richest woman, now merely the 9th richest, with a net worth of $23.5 billion. In all, she owns just under 24 million acres of land. That's a larger area than Indiana or Portugal. Still, that's a far cry from the land held collectively by the Inuit people of Nunavut, Canada's largest and northernmost territory. In the 1990s, the Canadian government granted large parts of the territory to locals via the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement of 1993. This amounted to 87.5 million acres, about 136,720 square miles, or 354,000 square kilometres, which is about halfway between the sizes of New Mexico and Montana, or roughly one Germany. That makes them the third largest private landowners in the world. Another Inuit area ranks number 5 globally. This is the land held collectively by the native people in the Inuvialuit settlement region, ISR, in the northern parts of Yukon and the Northwest Territories. At least 22.5 million acres, those lands are slightly bigger than that Chinese mega farm. The Catholic Church is not just the largest single religious denomination on earth, but also the second largest private landowner in the world, thanks to the numerous churches, convents, abbeys, schools and other types of real estate it owns all across the map. Estimates are that the church owns about 177 million acres of land globally. That's bigger than Texas and twice the size of Germany. Now, bear in mind that the ecclesiastical jurisdiction given to England was given by the Vatican. We could add everything that they're about to say is the top landowner. So we can see then that this Hanoverian bunch, since the game over in the 1700s, is but a front for Rome the Empire. So 177 is bigger than Texas and twice the size of Germany. Bloody hell. You know, just think look how big Texas is. Texas is huge. Yet even that is small beer compared to the world's largest landowner, the holdings of which are more than 37 times larger than those of the Catholic Church. This is the British royal family, headed by King Charles III. The Windsors are more than 6.6 billion acres around the world. That's more than 3 times the size of Brazil. It constitutes more than 1/6 of the planet's land area. And there are 10 kings tied to that position. But remember, with what I started off on, he's claiming ownership of the land, but he's not issuing the promissory notes on it. If we let him get away with this, and I haven't fully grasped it yet, but my mind is melting about it, we're going to get shafted. The question, so, you know, to own 6.6, that means he owns Pakistan. It means he owns India. Do you know what I'm saying? This is where, so it doesn't matter our religions when it comes to this data. It's the fact that we're all being dragged in on agreements that we don't understand to become the slaves of the Sanhedrin in Israel, because they are the ones that claim ownership of this system. And we've ventured into the Adam and Eve side of things, haven't we? Well, let me just put this to you. When you get into the Talmud and the Zohar, they're explaining things totally different than anybody of religion is actually studying. Because Adam of the Bible was created from the soil of the earth. He's a golem. Okay? And it needs only a divine Talmudist can say the words required to magically bring that golem to life. It's on that basis that they're moving to annihilate everybody that claims to be born of the biblical Adam. That's all the 3 religions. But it's not the Talmudians. Right? That's another thing that people don't think. The 3 religions each claim to be of Adam. Adam's not man. He was formed because he's a golem. Now you have to understand what golem is. I know we're not going to go into it now, but it's a magical being, a being created from black magic, basically. Okay? And it's a divinity of evil. So they've got everybody claiming to be of the biblical Adam, which is why They're setting it up, 3 world war strategy, for those 3 belief systems to annihilate itself, because they all claim to be of Adam. Yeah, now we can get into a little bit of that Gollum side of things again if we want, after we'll just go through this. But this is where they're at. They're not biblical. The Talmud isn't biblical. It's just managed to persuade everybody that it is. Anyway, so that again is interesting, and it's because you've been formed and as cattle to be ID as that equitable title and believe it to be law, that proves to them that yes, indeed you are Gollum, because you will believe anything and do whatever you're told, that is giving them the spiritual right in their eyes to do this. Also bear in mind that you're doing it to yourself, because they're only whispering. Then you're starting to see how these super elites have controlled mankind for thousands and thousands of years. And that it takes some time, great work to call it, to get it from where they are to the entire globe, but that's where we are today. They're now ready to harvest the entire planet, because they control all our maps, how we see ourselves, how we think. And they've made sure that what's in our maps doesn't match the territory or reality. Yeah. The question of the royal family's ownership is a bit abstract. As sovereign of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and several other countries in the Commonwealth, including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, to name the biggest ones, King Charles technically has ownership of the realms over which he rules, either entirely or in part. For example, about 89% of Canada is Crown land. This is, however, considered public land, distinct from the monarch's private estate, because that's how it used to be. It was the people's land, and Charles I was working against enclosure. So it's the barony, pushed in 1066, that's the bringer of this Solomon system. Yeah? Because it was never crown land. It was people's land. Yet public land. The crown's job was to make sure it was available to everybody that lived on it. That was the original trick. And that was tied to the Vatican. Yeah? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, Reformation time, it were Catholics who were rebelling against the Catholic Church. So clearly, this Solomonized side had started to show itself. Catholics said, I don't think so. It just, in the furore, of course, the other darker side picked it up, give it power, give it money, and made it and turned it into a real thing. Reformation, where people were in protest. And if you look today, the only people that are moving against the Catholic Church are Catholics. Because again, it's shown itself to be up its ass. Because it's not the original church, it's this Solomonized slave system. Now then. This is, however, considered public land distinct from the monarch's private estate. Considering the percentages, there is bound to be some overlap between the Canadian territories counted as owned by King Charles and those under the control of the Inuit. Well, Lancashire and Cornwall are owned as a private estate. Prince of Wales gets Cornwall, the monarch gets Lancashire. But they nicked it. That were a fiefdom. They nicked it. So again, not good. So you can't claim public land in Lancashire and Cornwall because it's his land, according to this schism that we've got in there. Again, this is data I've picked up today, by the way. There is, however, something called the Crown Estate, a real estate portfolio in the UK that is theoretically owned by the British monarch, but not part of his private estate, neither is it government property. The Crown Estate covers properties from the charmingly arcane to the blandly commercial. So like Buckingham Palace, they're all part of the Crown Estate. That's us, the people. It belongs to us. Approximately 55% of the UK's foreshore and beaches, but not in the Orkney and Shetland Islands, belong. Virtually all the UK's territorial seabed from mean low water to the 12 nautical mile limit. 241 commercial residential office properties in central London, including the Apple Store on Regent Street. Full ownership of shopping centre in Worcester and 50. But basically, we're just going on there. Oh, wait a minute. Additionally, via the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall, the royal family has direct control over the vast real estate holdings and their incomes throughout rural England and Wales, but also via the Duchy of Lancaster over the prestigious Savoy Hotel in London. Even King Charles might not own 1/6 plots dry land with Buckingham Palace in central London and Windsor Castle just outside. Plus, he doesn't own Buckingham Palace. Stop it. That's Crown Estate stuff. Anyway, so they don't know everything. But basically, the kingdoms were set up, commissioned by the Vatican. Especially here, it was commissioned as a king, but a king with ecclesiastical as well, so he can pull in those tillies and rents. Slightly different, and it gave the king the ability to become this imperial side of things, whereas the Vatican, obviously, if that had gone imperial from that side, Catholics would have gone apeshit. So they had to create a schism, or let's say capitalise on the schism that was already there. But the king has the first right to land in any nation that the Catholic Church commissioned a kingdom. That's how it works. His best mates, the baronet, get the second right. Now, when you get down to Lords, which is still, it's Parliament, they're still doing it on second right, but at Parliament itself, now I don't know whether they hold second right claim and then give out this title as a third right claim as a citizen. So you're three rights away from any claim to land while you're operating on the birth certificate, which you think is law, which it isn't. It's contract. So it's trade. We don't know that. We're learning about it. Muslims don't understand that, but they believe that they're operating correctly. Really important that Muslims look at that, because I know another thing that's happened that I saw, and I know Muslims didn't recognise it, but you look at the mosques, they're owned and built by wealthy families in the same way as the Christians, families of wealth, build churches, and the wealthy Jews build synagogues. So the people that create them are the ones that ultimately are the beneficiaries. I know the way it's set up, it's interest-free, but everybody's forced to put in, i.e. if you don't, you're ostracised. And that's a powerful control mechanism. That's how it used to be here when I was growing up. You know, that's exactly how it were. You went to church, you were looking at hierarchy everywhere. Everybody, I'm closer to this than you, and that was the way it went. And it's no different for Muslims, it's no different for Jews either. That's the way and the mechanisms of power that these organisations wield. Now, if they're working in sync with everything and everything's fine, then that's a great thing. It is a good means of keeping it together. But, as I said before, if it goes off, it's not. Now, one of the biggest setups I see that's happened, and it's already happened, was that because the mosques are basically a financial institution first, and a congregational situation second, they're influencing all the communities, and they have pushed, since you came here, that you have to vote Labour for the simple reason that's where the free money is, right? So obviously, if you were a Muslim and the mosque telling you that, you don't believe you're doing anything wrong, because you wouldn't believe for a second that the mosque would have you act contrary to your actual book. So they'd have to fix that in the Sharia by some way that is the reality of it. Now, you've got to go back now to 2001, 2002. So Tony Blair's in. The whites here, the English natives, were going ballistic about not going to war in Afghanistan or indeed in Iraq. There were millions of people down in London, in Manchester and everywhere, the cities, marching to stop it. There were also Muslims doing the same. Shows me the Muslims have no concept of this wizardry that goes on in the background and that we all suffer. And in that advice to vote Labour in order, there's always a good free money side of things, because that's how you built your communities. And we English knew it. But we English are not evil people. We're not badasses. The Empire is. We're actually quite happy to share and be friendly with people. But you know, when you can see what's going on, it's getting more and more difficult to hold that peace, as it were. So, in that advice, because there was such a huge block vote to Labour by Muslim communities as being directed by the mosques, it was that majority that allowed Tony Blair and Gordon Brown to go against the white natives' will of no war against Iraq, no war against Iran, against Afghanistan, because we're not anti-Muslim. It was quashed because of the huge Muslim vote. Spiritually, never mind what your map thinks, break this down to spiritual law, chaps. And you were actually responsible for those wars against your own religion. Now, the reason why I speak this is not because I'm trying to cause problems. It's because I know that the priesthood are holding this in reserve. They're holding it in reserve, like they've got all the white kids to be confused, dress like they're naked, all that nonsense, because of course they broke up the family and dad's not there to say different. And you know, a lot of the women today have been involved in this programming, so they're actually happy to watch it go. They've demolished our family units and have got hold of our kids and are making them act stupid. They're making them act contrary to what's in their own interest. And again, the wizardry that they've used on you there, because with the kids here, they're going to come back in a judgment on that. This priesthood, they're going to look what they're doing, look what they're this, they're that. They're not getting married. They're having free sex. They've got tattoos. They're drinking. All this stuff. They're going to do exactly the same to Islam on such points of this, whereas they'll just say, well, you were responsible for Iraq and Iran wars starting, not 9/11. Yeah? They're going to pull all this out of the hat and thrust it upon you. And this is a similar thing that they did to the Jewish communities in Germany before the Second World War began. So it's a strategy of the priesthood in which they've got enough control. You're not focused to what you should be focused to. You're focused slightly off here. They're obfuscating the game, setting you up so that you've broke the rules, and they can throw that on you when you're demanding. That's the way the priesthood works. But it is on us for not making sure that map we have is matching as closely as possible the territory that we're on, or reality around us. Because that trickery in that game that they play, the Talmudic that is the way. They've inverted the Druid system, which is the Kabbalah system, many, many moons ago to serve them. Now, let's have a look. Where do I want to go here? Right, so this is just something else as well. Again, just it was done with May, but I kept it in my browser because I thought I'll use this at some point. There's not much to see, but it's the Coronation of King Charles Global Research. By the way, they are a bunch of sort of leftists, but they do put up some good stuff. Coronation of King Charles will be remembered, if indeed if it is remembered, for the pronouncement by the Archbishop of Canterbury a few days before the event that people watching on television and on the streets should pay homage to the new king by shouting their pledge of support at the moment the king makes his coronation oath. Well, we went through that, didn't we, on the coronation video, and I showed that it's been said that even if you did that, it's not classed as an oath. So they are desperate. Troop in colour, there were maybe 20 people watching, whereas back in 20 years ago, there'd been millions. The Archbishop's recommendation, as published in the mainstream press, states, all who so desire in the Abbey and elsewhere say together, I swear that I will be true allegiance to, don't say it, and to your heirs and according to law. So help me, grantor of dominion. Right, now this is the key. This is where the wizardry is playing out. The extraordinary irony of this call is based on the fact that the coronation oath is the moment when the king is supposed to pledge his unstinting commitment to protecting the liberties and traditions of his people and nation, particularly relevant under the current vicious attacks on civil liberties. The Archbishop thus deftly reversed the roles. I told you you were an African shaman. By placing the emphasis on the people pledging their support to the monarch, rather than the monarch pledging his support to the people, he gave Charles' highly controversial leadership role with the World Economic Forum a significant boost. Did you get that? Yeah? It's just fraud on fraud, wizardry on wizardry with this guy. This guy is creepy. And if they can get us to accept this, his sons who are already up his arse trying to take it, what he's nicked after what his mother nicked will be sanctified in this next one. Oof, it doesn't bear thinking about people. Now, there was something else I wanted to point at it and I forgot it. It might come back to me. So I'm going to put this up as well because these commentaries, William Blackstone. So this guy, along with Edward Cork and others, are supreme in if we want to take a look at what the hell were England ever, if it ever was anything other than what it is today. And he's going through the revenues of the king. Now, this is interesting. And again, as I said, I saw this today. The first of the king's ordinary revenues, which I shall take notice of, is of an ecclesiastical king, as are also the three succeeding ones. The custody of the temporalities of bishops, by which are meant all the lay revenues. And this, of course, is King of England, because Henry VIII gave himself the pristine role over the church, which means he was an ecclesiastical king, whereas that revenue would normally go to the Vatican. So that's what makes England different completely. It's just unfortunate that the dark side has capitalised on those days of protest, because of course we didn't have money, didn't have weapons. In come the money lenders, the Venetians, giving them the weapons, giving them the money. But oh, wait a minute, you have to do this. Just like they brought in America to the First World War when we were surrendering. But oh, by the way, you have to support our will for the takeover of Palestine. Same gig every time. And every nation, if you study your law, has fallen foul of this kind of stuff. Hang on. This revenue is either ordinary or extraordinary. The king's ordinary revenue is such: he has either subsisted time out of mind on the crown, or else has been granted by Parliament by way of purchase or exchange for such of the king's inherent hereditary revenues as were found inconvenient to the subject. I don't want to go through all this actually, because I've gone through it once today, but it goes through how the king gains his revenues, how it was originally, what's changed. Yeah? But even so, and even looking at all this, it still presents this idea that the king and parliament hate each other. But in all truth, I don't think that can be reality, because you're sort of suggesting then that since the fall of Charles I, there's never been any smart guys on this land enough to see that common law doesn't allow this. Because everything government does, which is parliament, well actually, no, that's true, because we're not on parliament, or we're on government. So even I'm going to have to give this further thought. But it's important we take a look at this schism that's going on with our titles, because they are going to pull our estates right into the Noahide system. Everybody's going to be under the Sanhedrin, which is Talmudic, and you go back to their own real doctrine when you get into this Adam reality. Everybody's for the chop. Everybody that's not of this Babylonian race, because they do see things in race. It's insane. It's not even on belief. It's insane what they're doing. So you have to take that on board. I wonder if AI is going to be this supreme thing, but Prince Charles said his specifically. Now, this character that's coming to be the king of the world is only a front. Now, he's going to be sponsored by 3 people. There's going to be 3 people sponsor this character. I think we can safely say Charles is one, without question. He's already put himself in that mix. So there are going to be two other people that are going to sponsor him, whomever he is. Interesting. So that I'll put that up because I don't really want to read it again. But again, if this interests you, it gives you an insight into what the king does actually control and what it apparently doesn't. But if government is the cabinet is the Privy Council, there's something going on here, and it'll have something to do with us just having had a queen. Because if the Privy Council does indeed act for the absent king, it doesn't make sense unless he is a fraud and we still hold an absent king. I don't know. There's just, you get to one point and think, and then it opens another can of worms. It's outrageous. Do we need to do any more on that? Oh, let me have a look here. Yeah, you could see that and it were moving, weren't it? Well, that's alright. Right, so that's that shindig. Then where are you at? How do you use the live birth record? Yeah, alright, okay. So, how do you use it? You're holding evidence, right, of a title that exists. You're the holder. What is 9/10 possession? Right? So you're holding it. It's not yours. You don't own it. That's the trickery. This is where the deceptions are coming. You don't own it. It's a title that you hold a certificate because it exists. Now, this is where the bad stuff comes in. It's that you're using it as ID. So you're trespassing on something that belongs to the government. Ultimately, the monarch. Yeah? You're then classed as the trustee in that trust. When in fact, you want to be the executor in that trust and the beneficiary, which puts it correct that the owner becomes a trustee. So what I'm saying to you there, my good man, solving this, is not that I'm being rotten and not teaching you. It's that that's the premise you have to start to approach this. So it exists, it has value, it's an instrument, but it's understanding how you're using it and why in using it in the way you're using it, it's costing you a fortune. They've got control of your offspring, yeah? Because we are in agreement with the government on everything they're doing because we are using it in the wrong way. So it's no good crying, shouting, screaming, oh, they're horrible, they're evil. You are in agreement. It's a contract. It's not law, but it's contract law. So once you're in the agreement, the rules are binding as if law because you've agreed. Law is something completely different. It's protecting your rights, your God-given rights to the earth. But that's, again, you've got to start to then look at Genesis 1, isn't Genesis 2. Not easy. It's not easy. And the more your map's filled with the Adamic theology, the more you're going to struggle. That just is the reality of it, unfortunately. So, there you go. Do I file bankruptcy? Well, it's the birth certificate. You don't need the live birth record. It's the birth certificate. But the birth certificate, in general, cements the surname in uppercase as well, which they've been doing today as well. So it is slightly different than a live birth record if the live birth doesn't show the uppercase surname. It's not cementing you into your father's house. Let me just rewind that. I need to rewind it. There's a reason why it's uppercase and dead. Anyway, I'm not going to go in, that just, anyway, interesting. Do I file bankruptcy for the board? Why would you do that? Alive in person. Well, now then, solve the myth. This is why you say you've got a lot to learn. Are you a person? Is a person alive? Look up the definition of person. And you'll see there right away that if you use those terms in any communication, you're showing the state that you haven't got a clue what you're talking about. You couldn't possibly administer your estate. They have to protect your estate because they have to. That's their role. They have to protect the estate. You've shown clearly there that I'm alive in person. Yeah? That's a major problem, and why I'll say you have a lot to absorb. But if you approach it in the right way, you can make life a lot easier. Debbie says, looked at house in Clifford's. What? New. Oh, right, sorry. They are holding. Well. Okay. If you're in the garden with Adam and you're of the offspring of Adam, no. Right? You're on a piece of land. That's Genesis 2. Genesis 1 is the earth. Right? You have that right when you're born. Correct? Because Genesis 1 tells you. That's your right. What this funny system's done is sequester your right to land, because they're saying you're born in sin. You need looking after. Unless you prove you're not, you come back, you're then classed as live. Yeah, that's the mindset you have to approach this with. And as I said, we're still investigating this, and it just goes on and on and on. There's so much, not necessarily you need to use in your communication, but if you're going to declare yourself alive, there's going to be a series of questions, is there not? And we don't know what they are. We don't know what they are because they have a plethora to choose from. Right? So what I'm learning now is that I've got the basics of the reversion of the ecclesiastical, the common law, the equity, as a thesis, as a means to change something. However, until I know the bigger picture around each thing, the terms, the ideas, the acts, the rights, what the king's got, which is why this king's, which is why it's important that you may consider looking at the king's revenues. Yeah? So what I'm learning is this. There's no point sending off a notice to declare yourself until you're confident that you can go through those tests, whatever they may be. So whatever they throw at you, you're going to have some idea of what they're talking about. Aren't you? Because this is the thing, as I've learned, is you get in there, the door will open the degree to which you're showing yourself competent. Then they might, if it opens a fifth, they might send you a question or just put a passing comment in and for you to want your reaction. If you get that right, it might open another fifth. Do you get what I'm saying? When they know you're competent to administer the estate, There you go. But if you're going to go in there going, you bastards, you nick my life, I hate you. It's no good, is it? You're showing them that you're incompetent and just full of anger. And showing them more than the point that you don't understand your position. Because you do where you are in agreement with it. What's the job? What does the court do? It looks at to what is the agreement, and they will rule according to the agreement. And just because you are going, you've agreed over here. You've agreed here. You can't then strike about it over here. So it's the subtleties of it that are important, which is what we're learning. Coins came out an illegal tender in March 2004 according to Google. Okay. And stated it took over a year to get Elizabeth coins in circulation. Right, fair enough. Well, this is what I'm saying. It needs to be looked at because I think there would be notes in circulation now with his head on, surely. Unless they printed gazillions before. But then they can't. How can we use a debt instrument if the issuer isn't alive? You with me? She would have to be alive for that promise to have meaning. That's how I'm seeing it, anyway. Our Creator gave us this land, and we need to give Caesar everything back and start reversion when claiming the land and it's your birthright. Oh, Act Settlement 1700. But not if you're operating a third right to land. Here's your government's there in between. Settle it, government, common law, second right to land. But you don't want that, do you? You don't want to be under common law. You want dominion over what you've been apportioned. Equal terms with the majesty. But you don't want to be his enemy. You don't want to start beating him up because then he'll just snot you. Because he's got all the guns. See, and we went through, didn't we, a few years ago, all the occupation stuff. That's what we're under. That's what's operational. Admiralty. You need a deed of release. Says Panitheo. Read Crown Estate. It says the land belongs to the Crown unless an unknown person owns it. Yes, but which Crown? Crown Estate? Personal estate? You see, the term Crown is what we've lost comprehension of. And they've capitalised on that. You need a deed of release. Settle land Act 1925, yes. But we're assuming it's a 99-year lease, which means it's up next year, but we don't know for sure. So that Settle Land Act, which gives you all the right to your land, we believe ends next year because of the 99-year lease. So we have a time lapse, a window. But right now, what I'm saying is, this shenanigans with the money is a problem. They're doing something. They're doing something, and we're not seeing it. If you get my meaning. Right, so that's that. Right. No, we don't want that. Now then, birth certificate or a live birth. Alright, I want you to have a look at this. This is interesting. Because when you're looking at documents, are you actually looking at it as a hierarchy of command, jurisdiction, power? You know what I'm saying? You're not, are you? So what's at the top? The top, on the left, we've got the DM and the number. Right? So that's high up there, but then we've got in the centre, we've got the Crown Seal. So it is this, the ultimate owner of this title is the monarch because of that crown. Yeah? I don't know whether you can see this or not if it moves around, but okay, now we've got some pursuant to the Births and Deaths Registration Act 1953. So the Crown Seal, it says the Crown Seal, definition of seal, seal of fastening, that must be broken before access can be obtained. Right? That has to be changed. Doesn't mean you move it off, but the position, what that means has to be changed. A device or a substance that joins two things, making the seam impervious, also termed common law seal. A design embossed or stamped on paper to authenticate, confirm or attest an impression or sign that has legal consequence when applied to an instrument. Right? But there you go, a fastening that must be broken before access can be obtained. Right? You get that? Can you see how they're telling you? But we don't understand a word, which we do not understand our own language. And that's why we're at a disadvantage. He says, no, in this case it confirms that the Crown has created the child slave and obtained access to the living soul or a living being through deception and an intent to commit fraud and to aid and abet the mother and father of the child. In column 2, to commit the crime of placing a child in slavery without their knowledge. Now, they don't necessarily use the word child on the original entries of birth, which is why they had to create the birth certificate. But this stopped in 1969, remember. And when the hospital write anything down, it's boy, girl, yeah? But once this registration has been achieved and a birth certificate, then that becomes a child. It's a word of the state. You've shifted, and mum and dad have done it, yeah? In this case, it confirms the Crown has created the child slave and obtained access to the living soul or living being through deception and intent to commit fraud, and to aid and abet the mother and father of the child. In column 2, to commit the crime of placing the child in slavery without their knowledge. But mum's dad's done it, remember? This was done under duress and a pain of penalty via the birth and death registration. Yeah, so we are forced to do this, remember? Yeah? So there is a fraud. Now, pursuant to births, it says converting a living soul after birth to a dead person. Death via the act of registering. But it's specifically the father's surname, isn't it? Because the SQV trust becomes a dead trust. You're lost at sea. Your class is dead. Yeah? Vatican still own the original estate through the maiden name. Now we're on this shit system, this Solomon system. It's the whore collecting your offspring without having to have sex. So the mimic, he's mimicking exactly, you might say, the idea of Mary, Queen of Heaven. Alright? Now then it says to signature and description and residence and what? I'm struggling to see that. Will it go any? No. Oh, it will. Hey. Signature, description and residence of informant. Now, you see they use the word informant. That's not by accident. Informant, a criminal term, one who informs against another, especially one who confidentially supplies information to the police about a crime, sometimes in exchange for a reward or special treatment. Note, in this case, the crime is aiding and abetting someone to put a soul into slavery or the system of commerce. Yeah, so the king's only right to land from which is given a patent for the government to create another title, and that's called equity. The common law side is the barristers, the Inns of Court, the solicitors and lawyers have created their own jurisdiction, which we call chancery or equity. Right? So it's important that if you are going to declare yourself, then you'd have to create the notice in such a way that it can be pulled through chancery to show that you as the beneficiary and your rights have been annihilated. then you'd get your deed in law ruled by the Chancery Court. Yeah. Now, location, registration, district, Kensington, or ship. Okay? The ship that you are registered on. Yeah? And then if you go to the first column and it says number, and it's been blanked out, that's your entry number. The entry number that you were moved from boy, girl to child, and then registered on the ship, in this case Kensington. Location of the registration district of the slave bond, which is based in fiction, is boxed. Okay? Royal Borough of Kensington is a corporate fiction. So Kensington is the ship, and then there's a added, because it's on the land, and gives it another title. Now, these squiggly lines. The complete... Oh, wait a minute. Prevention of any other writing being placed here. Name entered after registration. The disallowing. Again, that's a blocking. Okay, that's not good. That's not allowed. Where are we? The complete box has a wave pattern from the top box letter to the balloon of the typing area after the signature line and shows that the jurisdiction is in Admiralty. The law of the sea also shows this is a bond paper. Right? So that's this in here, outside that box. Okay? Signature line shows the jurisdiction Admiralty, and that's to ensure nothing changes. In box 10. In relation to custody, it says registry is now legally in my custody. Statement of fact that the child or soul belongs to the Crown. And the fact that the registrar can use a crown seal shows that he has affiliation with the monarch. So no matter which way you go, government, well, it goes back to the monarch. Because he holds the claim to land. Why is he not issuing the instrument? A debt instrument based on the holding of these estates. Can you see what I mean? Now we'll go over to the left. The cost of converting a living soul to dead entity person via trickery. And there you go. So that's underneath your DM. Now, all information is boxed in making a float, therefore it's not real. Or is that the breakup of a ship into its compartments? Compartmentation. The cargo. Yeah, within the ship. You getting it? And therefore is not real. Or the person is penned in, trapped, enslaved. What has happened is the soul has been trapped, penned, trapped, or penned, written. Well, no. The soul only becomes trapped in there once you start to use it as ID. Which is when you get a national insurance. You're proclaiming it as we did with Johnny Lipstick. Johnny Lipstick showed us the game. Johnny Real Lipstick. But ultimately, if you ID on it, then you've trapped the boy you are, or girl, as a male or female grown up into this ship. And you, look, here you go. Uppercase Frederick Beswick, a dead person, as only tombstones have names in all uppercase. So a dead person signed this off. Registrar of Births and Deaths for the sub-district of St Mary Abbots in the Royal Borough of Kensington. Do hereby certify that this is the true copy of the entry, and that goes to the entry number on the left, in the Register of Births for the said sub-district, and that such registrar is now legally in my custody. Caution, to do with creating other identification, like driving licence, passport, etc., which is all done under duress, as without the certificate one cannot get these, and it says this is illegal. Caution, any person who falsifies any particulars of this certificate, well, that's not exactly It's not exactly true that, because they're saying you can't alter that and make a new one. It's not really. Everything's, the licenses are based off this. And if it's the birth certificate with the uppercase, it cements you as being ID'ing as the dead trust. And now, of course, you've got signature, cursive writing, cursed I've, an appeal or prayer for evil or misfortune to befall someone or something. The evil or misfortune that comes in or as if in response to such an appeal. Ecclesiastical, a censure, ban or anathema. Ives is a suffix of adjectives and nouns of adjective origin, expressing tendency, disposition, function, connection, etc. Okay? And it says at the bottom, proof of Crown's intent to commit fraud, Crown's intent to aid and abet others, that's mother and father, to commit fraud under the pain of penalty, and Crown's intent to aid and abet others to place another into slavery. Huh? Is that naughty? Or what? But that now gives you an idea of how you can look at anything that's legal. It has an order. Everything has a meaning. And also a hierarchical thing. This is the top. Yeah? As it comes down. But look at that big box with all them different compartments. That's a breakup of a ship's hull, isn't it? A ship. Anyway. Now then. Just to add to the Adam stuff, I don't know whether it does actually now. During the Middle Ages, passages from the Cepheus era Book of Formation were studied as a means to create and animate a golem. Although little in writers of Jewish mysticism supports this belief, it was believed. It's not Jewish mysticism, that's why. It's Zohar. Talmud supports this belief. It was believed that the golems could be activated by an ecstatic experience induced by the ritualistic use of various letters of the Hebrew alphabet, forming a Shem, any one of the names of God, wherein the Shem was written on one piece of paper and inserted into the mouth or in the forehead of the golem. The golem is inscribed with Hebrew words in some tales, for example, some versions of Chelm and Prague, as well as in Polish tales and versions of the Brothers Grimm, such as the word emet, truth in Hebrew, written on its forehead. The golem could then be deactivated by removing the aleph in emet, thus changing the inscription from truth to death, meaning dead. Alright? Now that works in sync as well with this, what we just described as far as shifting boy-girl into person. Yeah? You can shift it just by removing somewhere. The earliest known written account of how to create a golem can be found in Sodessa Razaya by Eliezer ben Judah of Worms of the late 12th and early 13th centuries. I say that's incorrect. It's way older than that. Samuel of Speyer, 12th century, was said to have created a golem. One source credits 11th century Solomon ibn Gabriel with creating a golem, possibly female, for household chores. In 1625, Joseph Stoll Medio wrote that many legends of this sort occur particularly in Germany. Now, are you now just cocking a wink at the Sumerian stuff about coming through Sitchin about the creating a slave race? Remember that. It all ties in when you start to, well, when you know this, when you have a good idea of a lot of stuff. Should I become a Christian? What does that mean though, Skyman? To be a Christian? I have no idea what that means. If you get what I mean. The word Christian is you would say a term that came in with the Solomon system. It was always Catholicism. You see, the thing is, the way I understand it, and of course, I want you to understand that this is just me saying, it's that if the kingdom of our Father is within, then declaring yourself anything that exists without has no meaning, in essence, because it's ultimately about what's in our heart, isn't it? And that there are theologies that show us. I will say this, I've studied all the religions. There isn't one I haven't studied. Now, I don't claim to be a Christian. I wouldn't say that because I don't know what it means. I study doctrine and try and exist how I understand it so that I'm not in breach of it. I don't know what that I'd call me as. But if the Father is inside and you're seeking the Heavenly Father, then surely you would be coming into touch with your own heart, changing it where you don't like what you see, and expressing it as often as you can. Because there's two forms of doctrine that I've studied that I would say are aiming at the same thing, and that same thing would be nothing temporal. They're not teaching you to make gains in worldly goods, worldly titles, worldly acclamations. It's not about that. In fact, if anything, they're contrary to that and tell you to give it up. Because there's two doctrines that, in my opinion, are moving to have you understand what love is and why it's the highest form of aspiration for man. And that coming to that understanding, you don't need to say, I am this, I am that. If you needed to do it, you would just say, well, I'm moving to become man, as described by the Word of God in Genesis 1. But the two greatest doctrines that are edging you to aim for that would be the Gospels and the, let's say, doctrines before it became Buddhism. It's also found in Sanskrit. It's also found in the Norse mythology. In fact, it's found everywhere. And I've read the Quran, as I've said, and I can see it in there also. It's in there also. So it's in everything. It's how we understand it. Or just a man of God. Yeah, I'd say, why not? Why would you not want to be always striving to be in tune with the image of our Creator as given to us in Genesis 1, and not so much trying to appease the world that we know as Genesis 2. But again, these are just how I understand these concepts as I keep moving ever forward to seeking that truth, because that is what I do. I'm always ever moving to seek the truth of this place so I can move correcting it. If I can leave this place having improved something, everything I do, wherever I go, I always try and improve it. I never like to leave somewhere lesser than it were that I found it. And I do that in all ways, every way I can. Always improving. Always looking for peace. Peaceful means. But always ready to look after myself as well. And to look after my fellow man. So, I don't know, Skyman. I can't tell you what you should do or what you should be. You just need to have to listen to your heart like I've done. Probably not all my life. I was a bit of a bugger when I was younger, but certainly once I started to understand that this place is a bit more to it than what we're taught, and that the rules of this place are not necessarily the rules that they've dished out. Anyway, on that bombshell, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Long may it continue this weather, but we do need a little bit more rain. And thanks for joining me, Skyman. Thanks for taking part. It's always good to have different cultures, different ideas pulled into the mix, because we're all seeking the same thing, really: solace and peace, and the love of our Creator. And on that bombshell, and good data, what can I say, ladies and gentlemen, apart from, till the next time.
electronic